Ever think about, like, a boxer setting up a knockout with a quick 1-2 punch?
Hmm.
Well, according to this Fox News YouTube video with Jesse Waters we looked at, that's basically the kind of strategy they're saying is being used against China right now.
Yeah, it's a striking analogy. And the source, this video, it really lays out what it presents as a very deliberate, two-pronged approach.
Right.
So our goal for this deep dive is, well, to unpack this two-punch combo, as they describe it, see what the key actions are supposed to be, and, what the immediate results and reactions are that the video highlights.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in. It started with a pretty interesting framing, didn't it? Setting the scene with the cabinet meeting described as, was it season 2 of The Apprentice White House edition?
Yeah, that's not exactly your standard policy briefing opener. It definitely sets a certain tone, kind of
Yep.
emphasizing results, maybe a bit of showmanship.
Yeah.
And the narrative praised the cabinet, their performance, strong relationships. It even mentioned Elon Musk being there.
Yeah. Ugh, right, Elon Musk. And wasn't there a little story about a Tesla they bought? Sounds like it wasn't just, a standard government car purchase.
Well, yeah, the detail that stood out was that they apparently paid full price. And the office staff, they get to drive it too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there was even a joke about Stephen Miller, quote, hogging the keys. It's those little touches, I think, that try to make these figures seem a bit more human, relatable.
Right. That's a personal angle. Okay, so beyond the car talk, the video claimed some pretty big savings, projected $150 billion from cutting waste and fraud.
Hmm.
And the examples they gave were, well, they grab your attention. Things like unemployment insurance for the unborn and alleged overspending on, like, organic shea butter and Nigerian masseuses.
Those examples, they're definitely chosen for impact, right?
Yeah.
They aim to highlight alleged waste. Of course, sometimes they lack the full context of government budget.
Sure.
But claiming savings that large, $150 billion, it signals a serious focus on cutting spending.
Okay. Then the conversation, it shifted to law enforcement. Some pretty strong actions mentioned there, like a directive to prosecute people going after Tesla.
Yes, that was notable. It suggests a really firm stance defending a specific company. The video talked about 4 arrests already, and another one coming, a Tesla dealership president,
Oh.
and potentially looking at 20-year sentences with, and this was emphasized, no negotiations.
Yeah.
That definitely sends a strong protective signal.
Yeah, no kidding. And it wasn't just Tesla, though. The video also brought up a huge drug bust, right? 45,000 pounds of narcotics seized.
That's right, a significant seizure, underscoring the, ongoing fight against drug trafficking.
And there was also that mention, maybe even more significant, about the CIA possibly considering changing its rules of engagement to potentially include assassinating cartel leaders.
That would be a major shift, absolutely. If true, moving towards targeting cartel kingpins like that, that raises huge strategic questions, legal questions, a really big deal.
Definitely. Another point that jumped out was Bobby Kennedy Jr. and his prediction about autism.
Ah, yes.
He sounded very confident, didn't he? Predicting they'd know the cause of the autism epidemic and maybe even eliminate exposures by September.
Given the numbers cited in the video, the rise from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31, you can see why that would be such a potentially huge announcement. It highlights a major public concern.
Absolutely. A lot of people would be watching that very closely.
For sure.
The video also touched on history, specifically declassifying assassination files for Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. These are documents nobody's seen for, well, decades.
Yeah, releasing those could be historically significant, potentially shedding new light on really pivotal moments in American history.
And Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s reaction was positive, apparently, suggesting maybe something relevant to his father's case might come out.
That seemed to be the implication, yes.
Okay, let's shift gears now to foreign policy. Specifically, the Panama Canal. Seems like concerns about Chinese influence are really central here. There was a trip, historic deals signed.
Right. This looks like a key piece of the strategy outlined in the video. It involved meetings with the Southcom commander, signing agreements with Panama's security minister, and the stated purpose, basically shoring up the Panama Canal against what they call Chinese influence, possibly by putting U.S. troops back in former U.S. bases there, Fort Sherman, a naval station and air station.
So putting troops back in Panama?
That's what was suggested. It would signal a potential shift in U.S. strategy in that region, tackling those concerns about China's, economic footprint head on.
Yeah.
But, you'd have to watch the long-term effects on Panama itself and whether it ramps up tensions.
The language used was very direct, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Talking about taking back the canal, saying China had too much influence before.
Very blunt language, yes. Aiming to project decisiveness, a reversal of past trends.
And there was that anecdote about Pistol Pete supposedly kicking China out of Panama.
Right. It's sort of a colorful story, perhaps anecdotal, but it reinforces that narrative they're pushing, reducing China's influence.
Okay. Switching now to the sea, maritime power. The video drew a stark contrast in shipbuilding. China apparently got 1,700 new ship orders last year,
1700.
and the U.S.
Just 5.
5. Wow, that's quite a gap.
It really is. And it points to a potential strategic imbalance, doesn't it? So the stated response is this push to revitalize American shipbuilding, invest in mariners.
Which makes sense, given those numbers.
Right.
A strong maritime sector is pretty fundamental.
Absolutely. For the economy, for national security, yeah.
Okay, so this all leads us to the main event, I guess.
Yeah.
What the video calls the two-punch combo against China, described as a mix of military and economic moves designed to break China's, quote, stranglehold on the West. What do you think they mean by stranglehold?
Well, stranglehold likely refers to those widespread concerns about how much Western economies depend on China for manufacturing, for supply chains,
Right.
and China's growing economic clout globally. So the two-punch combo idea suggests, hitting them with economic measures, tariffs, trade restrictions, trying to onshore production.
Okay, punch one, economic.
Right. And then punch two, military muscle flexing maybe, like the moves near the Panama Canal, projecting strength in key areas to counter that perceived Chinese influence. It's meant to be a coordinated push.
Got it. And this economic side, it involves resetting the table, as they put it. But they expect blowback, right? Like retaliatory tariffs from China, maybe even blocking exports of certain minerals.
Yeah, expecting countermeasures seems realistic if you're applying that kind of economic pressure.
And we're already seeing hints. The video mentioned China cutting back on showing American movies.
Right, that was cited as an early example, as sort of cultural and economic response.
There was a reaction in the video to China possibly targeting cultural experts, which was kind of brushed off with, I think I've heard of worse things.
Yeah, that comment might be trying to project toughness, maybe downplay the impact. But, targeting cultural figures, that can have real ripple effects on diplomacy, on people-to-people ties.
True, and the economic pressure isn't small scale. The video mentioned tariffs on Chinese goods jumping way up to 145%.
145%. That's a massive increase, a major escalation in trade tensions. The goal, presumably, is to make Chinese imports much more expensive, push consumers and businesses towards domestic alternatives, and cut that reliance on China.
Then you had Mr. Wonderful weighing in, Kevin O'Leary,
Yes, his perspective was included.
urging them to squeeze harder. And his reasoning was pretty blunt. They cheat, they steal, they don't play by the rules.
That's a very direct assessment, reflecting a strong view that, China's trade practices are unfair and require serious pressure to change.
But there was also another angle presented, right? Someone saying they just want the China issue worked out, even if that means some, economic turbulence that hits American businesses and consumers.
That's a really key point. It suggests a willingness to accept some short-term economic pain
Right.
for what they see as necessary long-term strategic gains. It highlights that potential trade-off.
And they even brought up the idea that shutting down factories in China through this pressure could lead to unrest there, adding a whole geopolitical layer to it.
That's definitely thinking about the high-stakes implications. Major economic disruption in China could absolutely have global consequences.
The phrase that kept coming up was level playing field. That seems to be the core rationale, the idea that, look, if the U.S. doesn't write the rules, China will.
Exactly. That encapsulates the main argument for taking this more assertive approach.
Yeah.
The underlying fear is that China's rising influence could let it shape global rules in ways that disadvantage the U.S. and its allies.
The video also tried to connect this to the past, didn't it? Linking manufacturing job losses in the U.S. over time with the growth of government jobs and tying that to declines in shipbuilding, cars, steel.
Yeah, it painted this historical picture, framing the current strategy as an attempt to reverse what they see as a long-term deindustrialization trend in the U.S.
A trend they argue was partly fueled by policies that encouraged outsourcing.
Right. And there was that pointed line, Wall Street got rich outsourcing, but it put our nation in danger.
That's a pretty sharp critique of past economic priorities. blaming globalization and financial interests for prioritizing profit over, say, domestic industry and security.
It reflects a very critical perspective on that whole era.
And the overall ambition sounds huge, talking about reordering the world, correcting, what was it, 31 years of letting China deindustrialize the U.S. What does reordering the world even mean in this context?
Well, in this context, reordering the world probably means trying to shift the global balance of power away from China's rising influence and kind of reassert U.S. dominance economically and politically. That 31-year time frame really highlights how deep the concern runs about the whole trajectory of the U.S.-China relationship and its impact on American industry.
And finally, there was this claim that the world is actually lining up with the U.S. on this. Asian allies calling Washington, other countries waiting online.
Painting a picture of significant international buy-in.
Though it's worth remembering, different countries probably have their own complex reasons and views on all this.
Absolutely. But the narrative presented in the source is crucial to justifying the strategy. The idea is that U.S. concerns about China are widely shared.
Right.
And the strategy involves using U.S. leverage, telling allies basically, drop your tariffs on us, bring factories back, buy American, and put up barriers against China, or face U.S. tariffs yourself.
Wow. Okay, so it's quite an assertive diplomatic push, too.
Definitely presented that way. Leveraging economic power and demanding alignment.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. This two-punch combo against China, as laid out in this Fox News video we've been discussing, it's this really multi-pronged thing. You've got military positioning, like around the Panama Canal.
Right.
You've got major economic pressure, like those huge tariff hikes.
Yeah, the 145%.
And this assertive diplomatic push to get allies on board. All aimed, they say, at countering China's influence and boosting American industry. And we've noted some immediate reactions, like the thing with American movies in China. So you've now gotten a pretty detailed look inside this particular perspective through our deep dive today.
Certainly a comprehensive and very forceful strategy is presented in the source material, a lot to unpack.
It really is. And that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about all these different pieces, we've talked through the economic squeeze, the diplomatic plays, potential shifts in global alliances. What do you think might be the most significant long-term consequence of this whole multifaceted approach? What kind of unforeseen ripple effects could come from a strategy this comprehensive, aimed at fundamentally reshaping things on the world stage?